You're listening to Girls with Grafts, a burn community podcast created by Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors, a leading nonprofit dedicated to supporting the burn community. In this podcast, we'll talk with burn survivors, share resources to help with supporting and improving burn recovery, and discuss how to prevent burn injuries. Here are your hosts, burn survivors and Phoenix Society's marketing team, Amber Wilcox and Rachel Kudlak.
Hello, and welcome to the season 1 finale of Girls with Grafts. I am Rachel, and I'm joined today with my lovely co-host, Amber Wilcox.
Hi there, everyone. I'm so excited that we are, at our season finale, but just because season 1 is over doesn't mean that there aren't exciting things to come. But before we get started on our season finale, we have some really special guests. But I want to send a special thank you to our season 1 podcast sponsor, Pritzker Hagman. Without them, this would not be possible. So we just want to thank you for all of that. But with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Rachel, because I think you want to introduce our very exciting guests here.
Yes, I'm so excited. So we have 2 guests for our season finale, and the one is actually a returnee. I think she may be the first returnee guest that we've ever had on Girls with Grafts.
I think so.
So I am so excited to have Jennifer Harris, who is a clinical social worker and therapist based in Boston, Massachusetts, back with us today. If you missed her first podcast, I highly encourage you go listen to it. It was a great episode. And if this is the first time you're hearing from Jen, well, she works with people living with life transitions, trauma, bereavement, end of life, grief, life losses, and chronic illnesses and burns with compassion while acknowledging the unique experience of each person. So Jen, we are so happy to have you back on the podcast.
Hey guys, it's so great to see both of your beautiful faces again. I'm so excited to be back and to be joined by one of my other favorite people.
Yes. So we also have Rich Casias joining us. He is a burn survivor and Phoenix SOAR peer supporter. I know a lot of people may recognize Rich in our community, but for those who don't, like I said, Rich is a burn survivor and he works as a California geologist professional based in the Northern California region. And as a Phoenix SOAR peer supporter and peer support trainer, he is energized by assisting burn survivors to learn to rebuild their self-confidence and advocate for themselves and others in the burn community. So thank you so much, Rich, for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the invitation. This is I'm so excited. Thank you.
We're so happy to have you here, Rich. Rich is one of the first faces I met when I joined my peer support virtual support group, and as was Jen. So this is a really special day to have you both on here. We appreciate it.
Awesome. Yes,
I love working with Jen too.
Yes, I know you guys are making such a great duo on the podcast. So Jen, welcome back. And since I hope a lot of our listeners listen to your first podcast and know a little bit about you, I want to start with Rich. And do you just mind sharing a little bit more about yourself and your journey as a burn survivor?
Sure. I was injured in 1989, and it's been, I'm from California, but I I was in Southern Oregon when I had my accident. So I was at the Oregon Burn Center in Portland, Oregon, and it just uh, woke me up to a whole new world, a whole new community. Um, and after a month and a half, 2 months in Oregon, coming back to California, it really felt like a long journey that that was wholly unique. So I've just been um, now I'm in the northern part of California because I was in Southern California earlier when I was burn injured, and it's been really a lot of fun. I get to work and volunteer with the uh, the great aftercare team at UC Davis Health here in Sacramento area, and so I've just been I think I've been blessed because it's really I'm not the same guy that I've had people tell me, Rich, you after your injury, you're different. So I'm thinking, yeah, I hope it's I hope it's good, but I don't try to press my luck with that because then it starts to degrade into well, you used to do this, and then it's like, all right, those are bad habits.
Well, Rich, can you tell us a little bit about your first experience with peer support? So I believe a lady named Pam came to
Oh,
visit you, and I've heard this story, but I think our listeners or viewers probably haven't. So you want to tell us about your first experience with peer support because I believe that's what drove you to, I think, want to do the same. Correct?
totally, and thank you for asking. Um, Pam Maxon is a burn survivor in Portland, Oregon, and we had the same burn surgeon. And uh, time is I can't tell when this happened, but it was clearly into the progress. But he came in during one rounds and said, you have there's some the pattern of your injuries and your legs look just like another patient of mine. He says, I'm gonna have them come in and talk to you, and it's like in this ear, out the other, and um, it was sometime maybe a few days or so later, in walks this cute little pretty blonde woman, white sundress and just smiling and talking and introduced, I was introduced by the burn nurse, my burn nurse Tom, and he's always got this crafty smile like, you devil, you know it's like I'm thinking it was so nice. And here she was talking to me and explaining what Dr. Smiley had been saying, that God had a burn pattern, and it's like, and she talks about her legs were red like hamburger meat, and the way she came across, it was so she made me feel so empowered to listen. First of all, here I'm a boy and getting visited by this really pretty woman, and it's like, did I wake up and is it drugs? But no, it really. She asked some great questions. She made me feel like, you know what, this is not the end. Because if I can look as if my legs can look as good as hers, I mean, mine were wrapped and Curlex and just it was just a mess. Um, so you're in the hospital bed and you're so focused on yourself and your bed, you don't have time to look outward. And while nurses and doctors will tell you one thing, to have this young woman come in and tell me I'm a house fire survivor. It's it was traumatic, but you too will rise above and will once you're out, let's have lunch type thing. And it's like
Mm.
ding, it's like it hit me that I'm not this is not the end. It was really the beginning. So, you know, Pam is my
And you're
BF.
still friends to this day, to my
Um,
understanding. I met Pam not too long ago, and you guys are still pretty close friends.
yeah, we are. We are. There was a point in our friendship I told Pam, I said, Pam, I'd ask you to marry me, but I know you don't like spicy food. I said, I'm all about picante, and she, because when we finally did start to have lunch and engage, and I'd go up to Portland to visit and to get some aftercare work. Um, she has a great palate, but she doesn't like spicy food, and the Latino in me, wants everybody to enjoy. So forgive me if you guys don't like spicy food, but we can still break bread, all of us.
Oh my gosh. Well, it sounds like that one peer support visit really changed so much for you. And I mean, that's something we hear from survivors all the time. And I can relate to that too. It may have not been my first peer support visit, but I can think back to when I was growing up and pinpoint, certain conversations that just stay with me today. And so, Jen, is there a science behind why peer support is so powerful, or why can we all remember these peer support moments so powerfully?
Yeah. So I think I was remembering that Karen Badger, who is a psychologist, an educator, a researcher, done beautiful research in different parts of the burn community, from providers to survivors, has done a couple of articles that she's done with some other researchers on peer support, specifically for the burn survivor community. And for people who don't know Karen, she's also a board member of the Phoenix Society and longtime supporter, and she's just a wonderful, wonderful, thoughtful human being. And I asked her to send me some of her articles yesterday. And I loved, I think we think that psychology is a science with a capital S, but it's not like an exact science, right? Like human beings, our stories are unique, how we're impacted is unique, but there are generalities to what can be really helpful and healing, right? And so what I loved in her articles and what I took from them, and it's just sort of like what we kind of know anecdotally, but what some of her research was showing, really some more evidence-based practice, is just the power of sitting with another person, right? Like that develops resiliency. We know there's a couple of things that we know now about that helps with resiliency, to just know that it's possible, right? But then also there's sort of that ease that we've talked about before, that I know you all have seen in peer support and virtual peer support, of just like being able to just be able to own your own story with somebody there who's going to get it. You don't have to explain yourself, right? You just know that person's instantly going to get it. But I think, what I took away from one of her research the most is that people walk away feeling better, right? That it has a positive impact. Like, is it going to be life-changing? Maybe for some folks it will be. They'll be finally get this light bulb moment of like, oh my gosh, I wish I had done that sooner. But I think more importantly, it's just the power of being able to have autonomy to start working with your own healing, and having that support to do that and encouragement to do that. So I think a lot of folks think that peer support is like having this cheerleader, and that's part of it. But I think it's more so just having somebody to sit and say, like, I get it, I understand, and whether it's similar burn patterns, right?
I'll never forget the moment I joined my first peer support meeting, right? Of thinking, you just feel so alone, and because you're not used to it, and your legs, and Rich, I also had leg injuries, and so my legs are wrapped. My husband's doing dressing changes by himself, and the two of us are just new to all of this, and it can be very scary. So to get on the phone call with someone who not only understands but can relate and help kind of ease your fears is, I think, very powerful thing.
Absolutely. And I think the other piece of that too is they're not correcting you, right? Like in peer support, they're not correcting you, telling you how to have to do it. And Rich, I'm going to always steal your line. I say to my clients, my private practice, like, we're not going to shut on ourselves. Like, that's not what peer support's about. It's truly about someone saying, no, you got this. Like, you know, I'm here to figure it out. This is what worked for me. This is how I figured it out. And, you know, and what you're doing is, you know, we're here to support you in that.
Yeah, you're modeling success. That
Mm-hmm.
I, you know, and I would tell my people that I'm meeting with, I said, my room was 2 doors over. I said, you too, this is going to be great. And I would tell them, you know, you measure your success on a daily basis. You know, this is a journey to literally walk, you know, one day at a time, one step at a time, you know, and I'm always interested to hear that reinforcement, that positive feeling that you get. I get it as a survivor, and I get it as a peer supporter.
Yeah.
It's delightful.
Yeah. Yeah. And also like that, having someone join in and be like, no, I got it. I've been there. Like, right. I felt that frustration. I felt that impatience. I felt that despair, or like, what's my life going to look like? And how could this even be possible? And to have someone who's like, yeah, no, I've been there. And this is what's possible. This is, you know, I think, yeah, it's it's really powerful.
Jen, we've talked about this before a little bit, but I think when experiencing trauma, right, there's a lot of research around those who have experienced trauma and peer support specifically. So why is that trauma piece, like the emotional piece, you know, we all know that the physical healing can be really helpful, but I think we touched on this a little bit in the podcast we did together last, but why is that emotional side, like the trauma side, so important to have that support? You know, the counseling and mental health support is always helpful, but I know you mentioned in your last that you also always love to recommend peer support, right? So why is that?
Yeah. There's something that happens in trauma, and you guys can jump in if you have experienced this, that I think it instantly isolates us, like emotion, like, right. Like no one's going to understand, you know. I think, I've heard this beautiful analogy, of it kind of like, we kind of like go out on our own islands, right? No one's going to understand. My experience is so unique and nobody could ever identify with it, right? My life is so unique, and it puts us on this own little island. And I think when there is, it almost is like you're the only human being who's experienced this, right? In this own little island, despite there's 8 billion people in the world, the majority have experienced trauma to some level, right? And so it does that. I think trauma instantly does that. That self-isolation. No one's going to understand. No one's going to like me. My life is over. Like all these negative thoughts that trauma brings with it. And some of those, and from my standpoint, as a clinician, mental health clinician, it's sort of those ego talk that is protecting you, right? Creating fear, protecting you from being more emotionally hurt. The irony of that is it's more emotionally hurting us, right? And so just having that one person or that group, if it's, you know, it's a peer support group that, you know, the Phoenix study does virtually, just to be able to like take that risk, that vulnerability, which feels so terrifying, maybe even more terrifying than the accident or injury that you sustained itself. And just taking that one step, the vulnerability, right? Because our brains are going to tell us the vulnerability is the same thing as the injury you just had, right? Even though it's not. Emotionally, we can survive, right? And just take that one step to come and join with others. Come join our islands. We're all this little new continent over here, or big continent over here, and come join with us. And we're not going to take away from your experience, but we are going to support you in that, right? And so I think that's what's so powerful, is it kind of allows you to start moving your little island closer to the continent that you were used to be part of.
And especially when we're using some of the same language that we're going, yeah, my itching, or this is happening, and across the room or across the divide, someone says, oh, me too. And it's like it suddenly clicks that you know what, I'm not alone. You know,
it's validating.
gosh, you said it. It's such a validation that I'm not whining. This is really bothering me. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that you said that language too, because it's, as providers, especially if we're not burn survivors, which I'm not, even though I am work in this community and love this community and hear all this language all the time, it doesn't connect for me to use it all the time. But if you've experienced it, you're going to use that a lot. And that is, I love that you said that. Like, it's just that instant connection of like, we got it. And, Rich, you had said, and you hear this all the time, like especially if we're inpatient, like everybody around me was telling me, get peer support, it'd be helpful. You can do this. Like it goes in one ear and out the other, but it is this sort of, once I love that you said, like, once you hear that language, it's almost like that, your antennas go up and you're like, connection, got it.
Yeah.
I think you feel more normal, right? Like when I feel more normal when I hear Rich say, like, I went through, right, this phase where I was, and the emotional, but also the physical, right? Like to know, okay, like and a lot of our survivors love to, when you talk about PTSD, right? So if I'm feeling those symptoms and signs of things that scare us, I think that being able to go, oh, like this isn't something that's not right. It's something that someone else has experienced, and I feel less like I'm out of my own head, I think, which is helpful.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, definitely. And because I can remember too, one time at World Burn Congress, I was in the Adults Burned as Children support group. And I was actually more so there. That was the first like in-person support group I really ever went to. And I was just kind of trying to take everything in at the conference. And it's funny, just even listening to other people, I'm like, oh yeah, that I did feel like that when I was growing up, or like maybe even things I'm not currently going through, but it also just validated previous experiences too. Like, oh, okay, that's normal. That wasn't me being weird or whatever.
Yeah. Because you're the best one.
Yeah. And I love that too, because I think with providers, especially again, if we're not, if we haven't sustained a burn injury, I think, they see everything so much, and they are experts, like, right? Like they're experts and they're wonderful and they're great and they've seen it and they continue to see it all and support people. But to hear them say it's normal, I don't think connects as much. But to hear somebody else who has walked those shoes, to hear them say it's normal, it's almost like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jen, it's magical too, though, that I don't ever think that, oh, Jen can't empathize with me because she's not a survivor. Your skill is bringing people to the conversation to have what, and because I just see that the sparks that start connecting, and it's like that Jen, she asked this in a way that made us talk about it, and it's like, and she's and I'm thinking, yeah, good. Yeah. I mean, it's a skill, and I love it. I love you for that. I really do.
And I think, for people who've joined the virtual support groups, I think what we try to do as facilitators is really lean into the knowledge and the wisdom and the lived shared experience of the people participating, right? To really put it back, you know who you are, what your experience is. So yeah, I think there's also, in the peer support, there's this shared helping that Karen also talks about, like, right? Like it's human to want to help others. It's also human to want to need help, but we're going to like, I'm good. I want autonomy. I'm good. So peer support also, Rich, I know you've talked about this, so you can share even more that, like, as much as I love supporting the group, I keep learning, like, right. I keep learning more and more. And listening to other stories and things that occur for me.
And Jen, you brought something up there I kind of want to talk a little bit more about. We do hear from survivors in the hospital or even outside the hospital who don't want peer support. They're either, I'm good, I don't want it, or whatever an excuse may be. But what advice would the both of you give to, one trying to show the power of peer support and how it can be beneficial, or maybe someone who's listening to this and it's like, maybe I should get support, and maybe they're hesitant?
It's really, and I'm sorry to jump in there, Jen, but it's I've in my years of providing support to the burn community, whether it's the caregivers or the patient or the survivor, him or herself, it falls into cultural, it falls into pride, it falls into fear. I've never had to ask this question. I've never had to show this vulnerability. I don't want to talk about this. No, and it really comes down to making that person comfortable enough to open up.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and I think too, Rich, I think what's so hard is that we live in a society that is very individualistic, right? Honoring that. Right. And I think, when I worked on the burn unit, even though the unit I worked on understood the peer support, understood and really wanted to have that, somebody says no, somebody says no. We can't force it. I mean, Rich, you had somebody walk in, times are different now, we can't do that. And so being able to just, I think, keep presenting it, because people are going to say no. They're going to be like, no. And I think often what I would hear too is no, I'm good. Because also on the burn unit, I think people get such great care. Occupational therapists are wonderful, and PT, you get that. Even, the nurses and the nurse practitioners and everybody, this team effort, people really feel supported by their team. So no, I'm good. I got it too. Right. And the other thing I hear from burn survivors is I don't want to hear somebody else's wallowing in their story. Right. Or I don't want self-pity. I don't want somebody to come in and pity me. And I've yet in my experience of hearing people's one-on-one stories, people's virtual, anybody ever feeling that. It's just not going to happen. But I think our egos are going to tell us is a thing to not do it. And so, I guess in our virtual support group the other day, I won't share specifically who was talking about this, but it was a topic of conversation of sometimes I get in this rut where it's I don't need it. I don't want it. I can't go to support group. And I would lean into that. No, I would lean into that ego talk. Nope, you're good. Or nope, it's too scary. Or nope. And lean into that and challenge it and step into the vulnerability to say, yes, let me try it on.
Yeah, we hear it a lot too, I think, or I've heard it a lot of, I'm afraid to talk, right? And how many survivors go for their first time and and I know I was guilty of this, of just tears, right? Because I couldn't even get, there was so much built up that I couldn't get anything out. And so just wanting to sit there and listen. And I think that's a misconception. I think that I heard a lot of you have to talk to go into peer support. And there's a lot of options to just sit and listen or sit and be with the people in the room around you that I think is so important. Rich, you are a peer supporter for UC Davis, but you also joined some of Phoenix Society support groups, one being the virtual support group that Jen helps facilitate. There's also that peer support chat that you work with us on as well. So I guess my question is there a best way, in your opinion, to get peer support? And why do you like the different ways that there is to get support?
I like let me answer that last question first. And that's a great question, because the dimensions of aftercare, the dimensions of peer support are it's mind blowing now. I think when we first connected this morning, I told you my tail's wagging. This is just another valuable way to reach the burn community. There's, it has all the marks of, so that the Facebook private group is great for certain people, because we find a lot of people are sitting in the room and just listening. Listening is incredibly powerful, because they're seeing these words that they themselves have used. The virtual is great because I can watch the faces in the room, just like in an in-person setting where I'm co-facilitating with my nurse outreach coordinator. We're watching the expressions, we're watching Are they getting it? Do they have a burning question? Oh, didn't mean to say that. Do they have a question that they really want to ask, or you can see the emotion? So the virtual is my preference. I'm sort of a social animal like that because I'd like to watch the expressions. And I've even had phone conversations one-on-one with it because you get better at when you practice, you get better at listening to those keywords, and they're going back to that, he or she's coming back to bringing that same thing up. They have a concern about it. Let's talk about it. So I think the question is there one preferred? I have a personal preference, but that's just because I like the virtual presentation of it as I do the in-person. But because of COVID, they shut us down. We're just now opening up. Our next month will be a hybrid. Did I answer the question?
You did. And Jen, do you have anything to add to that? I think, is there a preferred method that you think to get support?
I mean, I don't think so. I think try it on. Just again, step into that, take that, as Brene Brown talks about, have the courage to be vulnerable, right? Step into that courage. And I think Facebook is great for chat. It's a great introduction to just, I think what probably inhibits Facebook a little bit, you probably don't hear as much of, like, as Rich was saying, like the inflection of people's voices, and probably not as in depth of the stories, because that's a lot to type. Right? It's a great place to just
for me.
Right? Yeah. Absolutely. So try that on, take a look at it. But I think I think it could go two ways. I think one-on-one can be intense for some folks. Also, I think it can be a way to feel safer for some folks, right? Depends on who you are. I don't think there's a right or wrong, but I think, our virtual support group, the Phoenix Society does, there are others around the country, like Rich has talked about. Those are also great. And because you can just sit and listen. And I think if you're feeling like, I don't want to talk, that's okay. No one's going to make you. But if you get to just hear someone else's story, and that helps connect for you of like, oh, this is normal, or I have experienced that. I think, Amber, like you talked about, like those tears that you had, it probably of relief, tears of relief, but also tears of love, like that, like, oh my gosh, I showed up and I do feel something, right? I do feel more connected to self, to others, to, right, my island is joining a little bit more with the continent.
I love that analogy.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I value that group setting. I get a little intimidated with the one-on-one. It just, especially if you're maybe a little bit more hesitant, like you said, that group is a great way to just kind of feel out the water and just kind of get into it without, having a one-on-one and feeling the need to talk.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and I think for people who haven't done one-on-one, what I appreciate the Phoenix Society approach to connecting with peer support. And, and this was put together over years by, I don't know if you know, but like people who are survivors and providers who put together this beautiful training, and been really thoughtful. And the idea is, ideally, you would be matched with a trained peer supporter. So somebody who's been trained by the Phoenix Society, who they've vetted, the hospitals have vetted in the area, which I love. Somebody who's really ready and able in their healing process to go to that, to be able to, they're in the right space to be able to help you in an appropriate way, right? Because there's a methodology to helping other people, right? Because you've got us
absolutely.
Yeah. But then also doing it matched, like we know that, like, the matching, not just like burn type, but more so like age, ethnicity, somewhat burn injury for sure is helpful, but gender, sexuality experience, so like all of that, it's never going to be you don't want to look in the mirror and see yourself, right? But someone who can speak similarly.
I have a harder time as a supporter to maybe relate to somebody who's an amputee, because I didn't go through that. And so when if you look at peer support, right, finding someone who has been through that experience, it's more difficult probably for me to give that kind of, peer support. I can, but it's not as like, I can't relate to the same thing. So I find myself, there's someone who's had similar burns in the same location, it's easier for me to relate to that person for sure. Rich,
Yes.
speaking of that, we're talking a lot about the Phoenix SOAR program, which is a program, yes, developed by the Phoenix Society. And we're in about 80 hospitals and burn units across the country, which is very exciting. But Rich, I want to talk a little bit about the Phoenix SOAR program as it relates to the survivor. So why did you want to become a Phoenix SOAR supporter? And further, you want to talk a little bit about your experience as now a trainer as well.
Thank you. That's a great question. And I felt it was probably a year after I had been flying back up to Portland. I lived in Bakersfield down the Southern Valley, Southern Central Valley. And I always came away from these peer support sessions or group meetings so energized and so feeling like I got to give back. I just wanted to help others feel the positivity that I felt. And that was the click that said, you can do that if you'd like to join, if you'd like to get the right training to do this. And so if I'm responding to your question, it was an internal thing that I felt I needed to have a way to give back. And I'm often approached by people to say, how can I give back? And I talk to them about being what it takes to be a peer supporter. And it's not just, an opportunity to wear a hospital badge that shows you're a volunteer. You got to be a damn good listener. It's the peer support is the art of listening.
Yeah.
And knowing, because as Jen pointed out, there's people who go, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to hear about your story. That's right. We don't train you to just spend all your time telling about your experience and stuff. You have to get them to talk about their experiences, where they are. And the magic of peer support happens because you've given this person an opportunity to express themselves where they are and where they want to be. As the stages of grief are in there, and as the stages of recovery, there's a point where you want to focus on where you're going, and how to, I used to do this, I used to do that. Well, you know what? You can still do this. You have to maybe make some adjustments, but that's what survival is all about. And so much of peer support starts with validating them that they had the courage to come in and talk about it, or just to come into the room and listen. That's just an awesome thing. That is what drives me.
And I get, Rich, I love what you said that, like goosebumps that you, and it made me think back to like my early training days when I started to become a mental health clinician, and the power it sat with me one day where, that this is not about being a cheerleader for people. It doesn't work for a lot of folks. Being like what you do that's so beautiful is like that balance of supporting and offering encouragement and offering support, but that comes from that listening. Like, what are they needing? And yeah, sometimes there are moments people need cheerleading, like, yeah, you got this. But like really the cheerleading of like, if it's too much, it's not, it's, that it's overwhelming for somebody. But the other piece of that too, I think, in being a peer supporter and what you do really well is, and sitting in the listening, is tolerating the discomfort of somebody else. Right? Because, and even if you have been in that space, you're not in that space anymore. And it's a lot to sit and listen to intense emotion, right?
Yeah.
Intense hopelessness,
Yeah.
and despair that some folks might be in. And so being able to also tolerate that discomfort to not step in to rescue somebody, right? Like peer support is not about rescuing. And if you're to like, if you're in it because it does more for your healing than their healing, it's time to take a step back, or time to think about like reevaluate, or like, you know, like you, Rich, are always doing, like, I'm always honing in my skills, right? It's human to want to do that, right? It's so uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
To listen to that. Yeah.
I'm totally there. And
Yeah.
and Amber, it when you talk about your you have little shaky legs when it comes to being a peer supporter for an amputee. I you know, some of my buddies who are amputees, it comes, you too can do that. You can be a peer supporter positive because you have a way to draw out, you know, what are their challenges? Not you know, maybe it's insurance, maybe it's the discomfort of wearing a prosthetic, or I have to wear a prosthetic. You know, you're human, you're a survivor, you can listen. That's what makes you, they'll come away going, wow, this was so nice talking to you. It's like, I don't have to be an amputee to do that.
Absolutely. No, and I think that's important, because while somebody can probably relate more physically on that level to when I talk about that, right? I think emotionally we all go through the same kind of cycle, and being able to sit, but you are both right in terms of listening, because I think that's like a very good lesson to learn, is how to like not just sit there and hear someone, but really digest what they're saying and be able to process it to be able to know what they need.
Yeah, and give them the feedback that validates that they were okay to open up to you. That's what we teach in the training, is that how, you know, how well you listen has to do with that communication. And you know, of course, it always starts with you got to be present to win.
Absolutely.
You know, this is a team sport, but it means that you're all in. You can't come with your issues and concerns. You're there for him or her, or the family. You know, that's also one of my favorites, is because, you know, so many emotions in that room. Oof. It's so cool.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, one reason why I do love, you know, the Phoenix SOAR program in general is it's not just signing up people to go to hospitals to give peer support. It is a training, you know, it's not, there is work that goes in behind our peer supporters and the coordinators. I mean, the whole program, it's not as easy as maybe someone may think it is. It's like you said, you have to be a good listener. You have to be all in. So I love the training, you know, it truly does help, you know, those peer supporters, and you're constantly learning too. But I know we also have, you know, nurses and other healthcare professionals listening to the podcast. So I want to know from both of you, like, why should hospitals or burn units or wherever it is, why should people invest in a peer support program?
I'm so grateful that some institutions do make the commitment.
Well, and also we should say, at least when I worked on a burn unit, to be accredited, you had to have one. Like, they were moving to that. But so I guess my other question for Rich, if I could expand on that, is why should they invest in actually utilizing it? Not just saying you have it, right?
Patient outcomes is the magic word that you know, as I get closer to looking at why institutions want to maintain it. It's like just to have the positive outcomes of people returning them to the community. it really is a um, uh, it's just another dimension to your professional practice, whether you're an administrator or whether you're a nurse, therapist, someone, a new resident. What they have is they bring their skill to to an eager community who wants to know. We had a program called Lunch Bunch, and we had the new uh, laser burn surgeon, plastic surgeon on. Oh my gosh, half hour. It was so much fun. We learned so much, and we were able to. I threw in questions that I hear in peer support.
Mm-hmm.
It's an education for me, and you know, Dr. Ian, he was like, oh yeah, this is cool, and yeah, and he's got, and it's we need the healthcare professionals' perspective and authority to be able to say certain things. We're trained not to give medical advice. We're trained not to give recommendations for certain things for a good reason. We don't have that.
Yeah.
We're not trained to do that. Just like I'm not going to do Jen's. I'm not going to console people or counsel people. I'm not trained to do that. I'm a volunteer to listen and to provide support.
I love that.
I hope I answered your question.
I think, and just to another to like add on to that is, hospitals, the way that they're set up, with all due respect, is really to treat people and get them back into their life, right? So let's take care of and when I say treat, it's take care of the physical piece of it. And I think through the world of oncology, I think this is right, at least from what I've seen, people realize that people need more support than that, right? So you saw out of oncology a lot of acknowledgement of more groups, of more peer support. I think some of that came from people getting treatment, just sitting, getting infusions, right? They would sit in these rooms all together and connecting kind of just naturally that way. And so I think the acknowledgement that a whole hospital system that's there to treat you physically isn't going to be able to treat you emotionally. And the reality is, especially, with a burn injury, you're at the beginning stages, you are so worried about your physical recovery that the lived experience of how am I going to live with this sometimes doesn't kick in until you get home.
100%.
Back to whatever you thought your life was going to be, or you're trying to get back to, and there are other pieces. And that's when the anxiety or the depression or the post-traumatic stress that we know a lot of people experience. And quite frankly, I think we don't do a good enough job of educating people in hospital that you may have you're going to have post-traumatic stress. But because I tell people that, and that's what they're experiencing is normal, then they get a disorder, right? Because they're alone and isolated. And so the outcomes, right? It's the aftercare. We can't forget that human beings need support to learn how to live with my whole, like we've talked about, like my definition is trauma is anything that shifts your identity without your permission.
Ooh.
Right.
I
And so how do I live this new identity? Who am I? And that takes time. That doesn't happen overnight. That takes time. But doing it with the support of a community of other people who get it, people who are trained to get it, people who understand, people who are passionate about this. You don't have to do this alone. We're here for you. We can help you. And can we completely fix it? No, we can't. But we are here to help you navigate that, right?
And empower you to do this.
Yeah. And I think the success rates of that, I mean, there's so much research coming down of, like, here in Boston, there's like a new institute and some folks that are looking at treating mental health and then physical, and doing it conjointly. You go see a primary care, you go see a therapist, and then you talk to the primary care doctor, which is kind of interesting, right? And so if you look at outcomes, keeping people out of hospitals, it sounds awful, but like keeping people out of hospitals, if they have more support, I think they can start to see that what's actually a physical ailment versus an emotional ailment. Right? Like, is this anxiety, or is this like my gut hurts because I actually have like an ulcer,
Right.
or both. But is in getting support for like the itching and the pain, and some of it can be treated medically, some of it can actually be not treated completely, but supported, easier to tolerate maybe, with peer support, with acknowledgement from other people, that community. So
I think that's so powerful. Yeah. I know for me, in my experience, right, you're right. Like, I think if I let anxiety get the best of me, and if I didn't have had peers, or, wasn't connected with peer support, I probably would have shown up to the hospital again just to ask why my pants don't fit anymore, or why I'm like itching all of the time. So I think that's so important to know, like, because I think having gotten that support so early on, and we talk a lot about that here at Phoenix Society, like, the sooner we can get that support, I think the more helpful it was for me on my journey of, like, things are going to come and go. I'm going to need other surgeries, whether it's laser or whatnot. But throughout that, I had folks like Rich who I could turn to and to say, I'm dealing with a lot of stuff right now, like, and he's there to support through that journey. So I think that's super important.
Yeah, it really comes down to institutions, hospitals don't have the resources to hold the hand of this person on his or her journey, but they'd come across as winners if they supported an aftercare program that ensured positive success. And it's not about marketing. It's about making sure that the mission of the hospital has been fulfilled. They've got, because we'll help as best we can, but when it comes down to the mechanics or the infections and the like, there's a place for that.
Well, and I think it's helpful too for, unfortunately, there's not burn centers as nearby as, just a normal hospital or an ER. So when people are hours away from their closest burn unit, I'm not trying to tell people not to go if they're concerned, but you can connect much easier with someone just to ask questions about itch, or what's happening, or just those basic peer support questions can be so much more accessible.
Yeah. That's our, I'm sorry, but that's exactly our mission at UC Davis Health, is because we go from Western Nevada to the Southern Oregon, all the way to the, some partially way down the Central Valley. The Bay Area has 2 burn centers, and they need it because the populations are so great there. But we all collaborate, and it's, my burn pals come from all over, for hours away. It's just as easy to talk with my pals in Yerington, Nevada, as it is in Redding, California. So it's all about this tool of bringing it to them. It's just wonderful. Sorry, go ahead, Amber.
No, you're okay. Well, we're wrapping up on time here. So I know Rachel and I have some final questions for both of you. I think Jen has already heard these questions, but Rich, this is going to be our any survivor that joins our podcast, we have to ask them 2 questions. So my question for you, and Jen can still share hers, is what does self-care look like for you? As he takes a deep breath.
Yeah. Self-care, that's a great question, because I don't realize that it's self-care until I'm in it. And then I go, oh yeah, I needed that. Self-care is making sure that the fuel you put inside you is quality and isn't adding to your grief or your concerns. And I'm not telling you can't eat broccoli, but I'm saying, hey, try it. but so what you put in your body is really important. How you take care of your body after. And I've learned from you, Amber, about it's the breathing. and breathing and concentrating, because I also had a traumatic brain injury, because my head hit the instrument panel, and I was out for many days and took a while to get to regain myself. But one of the things I learned is to care for when I'm stressed, is to bring down the stimulations, whether it's my desk lamp or the lighting in the room, shutting off the other sources. So self-care to me means taking care of the noise in my head, making sure that I'm well fed and watered, and just like with my chickens, it's you got to treat them with care, and they reward you with eggs, and my self-care rewards me with a positive disposition.
I love
Sorry,
that. That's
I hope that
beautiful.
helped.
No, that was beautiful. Jen, do you have anything to add to that? I know Jen's self-care is, I think you shared this with us too, but I'll let you kind of share it again.
I want to hear it.
Oh, my mind probably changes, right? Like it changes week to week, especially as like I spend so much time hearing other people and supporting other people and navigating their self-care. I mean, we've talked before about, doing some of it seems silly, like doing these kind of things to me are self-care, because it really is meaningful to me. So really finding things that are meaningful. Rich, you're right. Like I don't know if you guys watched Jonah Hill's documentary about his therapist.
I haven't yet, but I've heard it was really good.
It is fantastic.
I'm going to have to now.
Fantastic. But one of the first things his therapist says is you got to take care of your body. And when you do that, you will feel better by 80%. And it's so Rich, you're right. What you put in your body, what you nourish it with, sleep, getting movement, whatever that looks like. I don't think it has to be these huge exercises, but movement. Amber, you know that from, yoga, there's that movement alone. So that is great. But I think, finding things that are meaningful to you, at least for me, one, sleep sleep and hydration are also really important. We forget how hydration is super, super important for us. But really,
how much water you take in and all the naps. I know a nap is a powerful thing. I will tell you that. And, just a quick 30-minute nap will go a long way, I think.
There's a book that came out about the research of naps.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is great. So, doing all those things. But I will say, like, advice for people trying to figure out self-care, right? Because I struggle with this too. Like, I got to do all the things. If I'm not doing all the things, just do one. One for that day. Is today hydration? Is today getting extra sleep or taking that nap, that rest? Just, do one. And I struggle with that. Like, you can't do it all. It's a process, right? So listen to what you need. And what am I needing today? All right, well, I might need a little extra nap. I got a little sinus stuff going on. So great.
Yeah. Yes. No, so I'm not a napper, but sleep is definitely one of my top self-cares. I look forward to sleeping in on the weekends every week. So looking forward to doing that tomorrow.
So my husband, Tyler, and I'll schedule the naps. Like, this Saturday afternoon, we had a long morning. You want to go take a nap? Yeah. Okay. So
yeah.
Love that.
Love.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Rich, we do have one final question for you. So we talk a lot about burniversaries on this podcast, and I would love to know if you celebrate your burniversary in any special way. If you don't, that's okay too. We just sometimes they're unique ways people celebrate, and we always love to hear.
I do, and it. And I don't want to sound boasting or anything, but I've learned that it's my day to celebrate that I'm here and that life is too short. So on my birthday and my rebirthday, I call it my rebirthday.
I love that.
Nothing spiritual about it, but I donate blood or plasma, and I get a great lunch with wine because I'm not working at the same intensity level. I will schedule client calls, field visits. It's rare that I have to work on my rebirthday, which is June 23rd. And I will take care of myself. That's my ultimate self-care day. I will go for a nice ride if the weather's right, because I'm a baby. I'm not, if it's raining out, I'm not going out there. But when it's a really nice day, so I've really it's about me. So
I love that.
It's the ultimate self-care day.
It is my ultimate self-care. Thank you so much, because that's a great question, and I'm there's such a need for blood products and plasma and platelets, and it's 2 hours of my time. Big deal. I watch movie, and they take such good care for me. So that's what I do on my rebirthday.
Love that.
Celebrate yourself. I mean, you've done all the hard work to
exactly, and still give back.
And then give back, right? It's meaningful. Yeah, I love that.
I'm the more I read about how the oncology scene, people their systems get trashed with their blood's just obliterated, and part of what you're giving back when you're donating is that recovery. So it's still a part of supporting your community. There's a huge need right now too, nationwide. So.
Well, as we close out here today, I do want to pause for just a moment before we wrap up and just thank our season 1 podcast sponsor. This is our season finale. So first and foremost, I want to thank everyone for listening and tuning in. But the Pritzker-Hagman Burn Injury Legal Team helps burn survivors and their loved ones pursue compensation and justice throughout the United States. If you have any legal questions for them, the attorneys at Pritzker-Hagman are ready to help, and you can find out more at legaljourney.guide.
Yes, thank you so much, Rich and Jen, for joining us for the season 1 finale. I do want to also give everyone an update. Season 2 will be premiering February 1st, so not that too far away. And we have a very special guest of the name Ketchy joining us for the first episode of season 2. So be on the lookout. Join us on the 1st. But I could not have imagined or put together a better season 1 finale with you both, Rich and Jen. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We have been getting comments galore of folks super excited to see both of you on this podcast. So I want to thank everyone who's watching live today as well.
Yep. And come see us virtually. Come to the Burn Survivor peer support, virtual peer support every other week, 2nd and 4th Mondays.
Right.
Yeah. Or join our Facebook community. All of those links will be in the podcast descriptions. If you're not familiar with the Facebook community or the virtual support options, we will make sure that you get those links so you can see Jen and usually Rich's face as well on those Monday night support groups too.
And or even yours sometimes.
And mine. Yeah, usually mine as well.
Come on sometime.
we need it. We need it. And thanks to both of you. I love this platform, and this is so delightful, and I was tickled to see some of my friends check in there and wave to Gina and Howard and all those knuckleheads.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much. We will talk to you both very soon. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Girls with Grafts. If you are enjoying this content, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.